All right.
All right, here we go. Cool.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to FabTV, Tiffany.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good.
Yeah.
We're going to start with a little, since you're a big-time attorney, I want to ask you some big-time questions.
Sure.
And let's start off with the Laughlin case. And one of my questions is going to be about this case is, do you think the pandemic had a role, like, in aging this case?
I think that the pandemic slowed down the court system. I can tell you, I think overall in all states, courts were not closed, but pretty much in a sense where unless you had procedures in place to do things remotely, like what we're doing with Zoom, if they didn't have things like that and judges didn't have access to things like that at their home, there's no way that you can go forward.
Right.
You can't be there in person. So if you don't have the remote capabilities, then your case is going to sit. So I think that, I think it did get a little stale. And I also think that overall, I know a lot about this case. Obviously, the big concern is if they don't take the deal, the kind of, penalties and jail time that you'd be looking at. So I think that strategically, it was probably the best move to make, considering all of the factors and what the sentencing guidelines are in California.
That's one of my questions. The judge didn't accept nor reject this offer, so pre-ruling. So what's up with that? That he's like not accepting it nor rejecting it? Was he just thinking about it?
Well, so the prosecutors or the district attorney, they have the right to offer a plea deal. Now, the plea deal has to be accepted by the judge. So whether or not, I think it's interesting that the judge is kind of not sure. I think maybe it might have to do with, like, in Illinois and in Florida, there are certain guidelines that have to be followed. Maybe they're outside of the guidelines. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I haven't seen all of the details about the plea. I don't know if you have.
Do you like the guidelines as incentives, like the point system to get it to this certain level of a plea bargain kind of thing? Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Exactly. So the sentencing guidelines, every state is different. So I can't speak exactly how California does it, but in Illinois, there are certain guidelines that have to be followed. So if you have a first-degree felony, then the range of sentencing is from X to Y. In Florida, they have a specific sheet that's filled out that is then submitted to the judge, and the judge has to review it to then determine whether or not they're going to accept that or if they're going to modify. A judge can come back and say, look, I think the sentencing guidelines are not as applicable in this matter, and they can either increase the sentencing or they can decrease it. So they have some like wiggle room per se to be able to do that. So, yes, to answer your question, that's pretty much what it is.
Okay, how come the colleges, like Singer and the colleges, aren't so liable? Like, how come they're not like being punished themselves?
It's a good question. I think their whole argument really from the get-go was it's more about how do we fundraise and how do we have people contribute to the school, not so much as paying for a seat or being able to be enrolled in the school. I don't know how they're getting away with it right now, but obviously if the district attorney doesn't believe that there's enough to proceed forward, and there's got to be some kind of loophole there that's allowing them to, kind of get into the segue of it's more of a donation per se.
Yeah, and speaking of donations, how come in the past, this has been going on since the beginning of time. Just, you buy a wing or you do make a donation and your son gets in. And now It's kind of like, because there was a whistleblower about something completely different, this thing gets exposed.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
mean,
not, it's like a double standard.
yeah, well, I think for a long time, obviously it has been going on. I think that I'd like to think that now, more so than before, I think that they probably really did kind of follow some of the guidelines of donations. Like, here, you can buy a bench. If you donate, 20 million, we'll donate this, you'll have a gym or something in memory of you. I think they got sloppy with it. And I think that it became a norm instead of it happening occasionally, because there's only so many benches you can buy, right? So I think what ended up happening was these people are paying in with expectations that their children are going to be enrolled there and accepted. And I think it's such a large scale now that parents got upset and they said, well, I might not have as much money as Lori and them, but my kid deserves to be here. And so I think that the whole thing blew up and was just completely out of control. I think if they would have kept within the guidelines they had before, maybe it wouldn't have been the way that it is now.
True. Do you think, or I know you know, but I'm just going to say, do you think that Lori and Mosimo will have special treatment, preferential treatment in jail?
I mean, I think that they're probably going to have some kind of confinement inside. I think it's dangerous.
You know what's never talked about, and I know this from some clients, friends of mine, that there's also like pay jail. You can pay like $250, $350 a day to be in a separate little jail with a TV set, books, magazines, like your own private suite. You could have that if you pay the whatever per day.
Yeah, well, I don't know specifically about that, but I do know that inside, obviously, it's all about who you know on the outside. So, I mean, look at, for example, the situation. I mean, he explained specifically what was happening on the inside. He had this guy who would bring like the chicken and the beef, and they would cook, and it was a whole operation.
Right,
I mean,
right.
that you can get inside because of the people that you know outside. So I think it's definitely going to play a role, but I also think it's not safe for them, to be in any kind of, general public, so I think they're going to have to be somewhere, because otherwise, the prison, the jail is going to be responsible if something were to happen.
Right. Also, for these type of celebrities, what does a supervised release look like for them? I mean, does Lori go to Costco and has to go someone with her? What does that mean, their supervised release?
I mean, I think it's going to be, honestly, considering considering their status, financial status, I think somebody could probably go to Costco for them. I'm sure they could also use a delivery service. I think supervised release may mean some kind of ankle bracelet. Maybe
Whoa.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be confined to their home. And I don't think that they're going to be able to go to Costco. I mean, if they have obviously work engagements or something like that, I think it's going to be minimal. I don't see them being able just to go to the grocery store per se, considering, like I said, they can have somebody do that. What they can't have somebody do is go and, whatever it may be, whatever, maybe they have some kind of engagement at X, and all of that would have to be ran through the parole officer and then approved. And then they would track it with an ankle bracelet. So I think it's going to be more of a home confinement situation, and then supervised with a parole officer.
Right, right. So this is just a weird case that, like, it's very high celebrity, very high profile, and the husband gets a bigger sentence than the wife. I'm wondering about that. He got 250 hours of community service and 5 months in prison, which she got 150 hours and 2 months in prison. So how come they don't get the equal sentence?
Well, it could also be, I mean, what was her role? Was he the one? I mean, he must have been the one that was initiating it, the one that was kind of the backbone of the operation, versus maybe she was just a conspirator. Maybe she was just there assisting him, which she could be then tried in the same capacity as he is. But maybe the judge, or maybe like you said, it's not actually approved yet, so we'll see what happens. But obviously, the DA found that, her involvement wasn't as much as his involvement. And you also get into what they say, what is the mens rea? What is the guilty mind? And who was in charge of the actus reus, which is the guilty act. So maybe he had more of those two components than she did.
Right, right. Did you like the movie Legally Blonde?
Yes, yes.
Just throw that word in because she said she used the word mens rea, so I was like, I think this reminded me of that.